Hi, everyone, and welcome to the week 12 lecture. As I mentioned, I'm doing a video lecture for this week and for week 13. Okay, and hopefully it'll prepare you for the assessment 3 presentation, the self-reflection presentation, and also for the final submission of assessment 2, right? Your critical response and report. And I'll talk more about that in week 13, but just in terms of assessment 2. Okay, the EWR. So you'll get feedback if you haven't gotten it already from your teacher on draft 2 of your critical response. And, review the feedback and make sure you understand it. And book a consultation with your teacher to discuss the feedback, prepare any questions you have, if you need some more support or advice in terms of doing better for your final draft, right? Revise the critical response. In some cases, you might add a point or two. It's up to you. And then you're going to write a report section. And I'll talk more about that in the week 13 video lecture. Okay, but basically, you're going to report on your use of online tools like GenAI or Grammarly or WeChat or any other tool that you've used to help you to improve your writing and evaluate that in a reflective way. And then you'll need to submit the final draft. Both the critical response and the report will add up to about 1,500 words. And the deadline for that is Monday, December 4th, which is in week 14. Okay, so I'll go into more detail about the report section in the week 13 video. Okay. But do make sure that you submit it to Blackboard under assessment 2. It's the final draft is not EWR. It's actually related just to the course. So you submit it under assessment 2, not assessment 2 EWR. And, as I mentioned, use the tools to help you to improve the final draft, including the report section. And then you'll have to, basically submit that with the report. Okay. So, consider using WeChat again, because it's tailor-made for Chinese learners, right? Okay, so moving on to effective presentations. A little of this is review, repeating, okay? But remember that the main purpose is to engage your audience, okay? If you don't get the attention of your audience and keep the attention of your audience, then your other purposes like informing the audience, entertaining them, persuading them will generally fail, right? Because the audience will not be very interested and they won't be paying attention to what you're saying very closely. They'll be distracted probably by other people or by their phones or computers or something like that, right? So, but if you can engage your audience, they'll pay attention to you, and then you can communicate your messages and persuade them or even sell something, right? More effectively. So don't leave them bored in the presentation. And we'd really like you to try to practice doing this in your presentation for assessment 3. You've had some chances to think about this in your seminar. And, there were different techniques that you discussed in your seminar, right? So in terms of visuals, I'll talk more about this later with the example presentation. But, this is one way, of course, is making sure the visuals in your presentation are appealing, interesting. Making sure the language you use is natural spoken language, okay, that the audience can connect with more easily. It's a little more informal, right, compared to written language. This, again, is something you studied in the seminar and perhaps practiced. So please don't write your presentation, okay, because written speech and spoken speech are very different, and it's difficult for an audience to engage with language that's written but kind of read or recited. Yeah, it's not very effective. Remember, as you're talking, to show that you're actually interested in the topic, that it's important to you. And in this way, you can communicate some emotion, right? Of course, the audience is going to be bored if you are bored giving the presentation, if there's no I'm not going to say excitement, but if there's no interest or feeling in giving your presentation, then the audience is not going to respond emotionally either. So try to bring a little, dare I say it, passion, energy to your presentation, and hopefully that energy will communicate itself to your audience as well, and they're more likely to be engaged then. Okay, so if you seem bored, so will your audience. Clearly, eye contact, gestures, other nonverbal communication is important in terms of engaging with your audience. If you don't use eye contact, then the audience is likely not to pay as much attention. And you can support your message with nonverbal communication and gestures, and movement in general can help the audience to pay attention. Yeah. But what I'm going to focus on now is, how you can engage your audience through your voice. Okay, and speaking in a clear, strong, measured, and varied voice is quite important. It's kind of the foundation, really, of a engaging presentation. So let's examine this, and I'm going to present to you today a tool that will help you to kind of like get feedback on how you speak and your voice, and some of the features that you could possibly improve before assessment 3 and in preparation for your other assignments. Okay. So what do we mean speaking in a clear, strong, measured, and varied voice? Well, in terms of clear, obviously accurate pronunciation is important so that people are not kind of guessing what you're trying to say. And to do this, just make sure that you check any words that you're not sure about. You might not know the exact pronunciation. We'll go online and practice the pronunciation of these words, okay? A strong voice has, it's not quiet, right? There's good volume to it, and there's a certain amount of, as I mentioned, energy and enthusiasm in a strong voice. Measured refers to the speed of speaking, not too fast, not too slow. Okay, kind of in the middle, moderate speed. And this is also related to your pronunciation. If there are slight variations in your pronunciation, I won't call them mistakes, but if the pronunciation is not exactly what the listeners expect, then if you speak at a moderate speed, then it's likely the listeners can kind of figure out what you're going to say. But if you speak very quickly, any mistake or deviation in pronunciation will be difficult for listeners to process. Okay, so speaking at medium speed is quite important, and practicing that. And keep in mind that you should try to avoid long pauses. Long pauses often come from when someone is searching for a word, okay? Especially when you're trying to give a presentation in a foreign language. So keep in mind that if you practice your presentation at least a few times before the actual assessment, then these long pauses are not likely to show up, because you've had practice in presenting your ideas and talking about your ideas. And as a result, you'll be familiar with what you want to say, with the content, and even with the kind of words you're going to use. Okay, so practice is important. Finally, when I talk about varied voice, it's very much related to things like intonation, right? And going up or down, and the pitch of your voice, whether you stress certain words or emphasize certain words as English speakers do, and using some slight pauses, not long pauses, but slight pauses. The opposite of varied is kind of like a flat voice, okay? And I don't know if you've come across maybe someone who gives a lecture in a flat voice, or you've seen other student presentations and they're speaking kind of almost robotic, right? Without any variation. It just, no. I'll give you an example a little later, but it's really boring. It really turns audiences off. this varied voice, the intonation, the word stress, and things like that, and pauses too, help listeners to process the information in English. And without it, we quickly kind of stop processing it because it's a bit difficult and not pleasant. Yeah, so we want to avoid this flat voice. We want you to introduce a varied voice in our presentation. And again, I'm going to present a tool to show you that can evaluate how varied your voice is, and hopefully will give you a chance to improve. Okay. So the tool I'm going to introduce is actually embedded within PowerPoint. It's called Speaking Coach, and you can access it through a PowerPoint in OneDrive. Okay, and this here's the link for it. I can share it in an email later, but this gives you some basic information about Speaker Coach. But I'm going to demonstrate it for you now, and you can see it's actually quite easy to use and quite quick, and the AI can give you some pretty valuable feedback on your speaking. And based on the feedback that it gives you, you can try to improve and see if the results are better. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to show you the tool, and then I'm going to give an example presentation, and let's see what you think. Okay, and let's see what Speaker Coach thinks. So I'm going to exit the PPT now, and I opened this PPT within OneDrive. Okay, so it's already online, this PPT. So that's one thing you need to do. Okay, is upload your PowerPoint slides, assuming you're using PowerPoint, of course, onto OneDrive, onto your OneDrive account. Okay, and then when you open the PPT within OneDrive, you have this interface that you see right here. And you see this button here, okay? It's called Present. And if I use the drop-down menu, then if we go down, notice it says Rehearse with Coach. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for. So Present, and then drop down, Rehearse with Coach. Okay, and when I click on that, and as you can see, I have this pop-up, and I'm actually, actually I have to open a different PPT. Sorry, that's my mistake. So let me go to my OneDrive, and I'm going to open this PPT because this is the example presentation. Okay, and you see it's still there, right? Present, and then drop down, and then Rehearse with Coach. Okay, and then we get this little pop-up, and it says show real-time feedback, but I find this is actually quite distracting and annoying, so I don't want to see feedback as I'm presenting. So I'll just unclick that. And then basically what I'm going to do is, for this first time, I'm just going to give part of the presentation because I'm going to intentionally do it not so well. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to start rehearsing, and let's see how it goes. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jay. Today I will talk about my journey as a critical thinker. The first critical thinking strategy I want to talk about is intellectual humility. It's from chapter 3 of the course book. It talks about awareness of lack of knowledge, the need to investigate, explore more, and the willingness to listen to others. A second critical thinking strategy is assumptions. What assumptions am I making? This is a question that we learned in class. It involves avoiding simple mistakes and challenging my beliefs for important decisions. These two critical thinking strategies have an impact on my thinking from the course. In terms of my self-evaluation of critical thinking, before the course, I thought I was stage 4, a practicing thinker. I understood and tried to use basic critical thinking concepts. At the end of the course, I think I reached stage 6, accomplished thinker, because I have a deeper understanding thanks to the course book and other readings. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That's just, yeah. I'm just going to go to the end. There we go. Okay. So you can see quite quickly, it gives me this feedback report. Okay. And so let's go over some of the components of the feedback report that the AI generates. Well, it gives me the time spent. So this is obviously for assessment 3, you're aiming for about 5 minutes. So if you practice multiple times with Research Coach, you can get a sense of your timing. Okay. Now, obviously, this timing is wrong for the presentation. That's not the real presentation as I give it. But in any case, you can track your timing and make sure it's within the allowable. You're aiming for 5 minutes, right? Okay. And notice the speed of talking, the pace. Okay. It says it's pretty good. Okay. So that's not an area that I need to improve, the speed of my speech. It's about moderate speed, somewhere in the middle. Notice the green. Okay. And it does show me over time, over the course of my presentation, whether my speed varied much. And it didn't really. You know, some people towards the end of a presentation, because time is ticking, they might speed up. So if that happens to you, then you'd be able to see it. AI would point that out to you, okay? Fillers is something that is similar to or and you know, it just raises your awareness about it. To be honest with you, fillers are not really a big problem unless you're using them really, really frequently. Yeah. So it's natural part of speech, but it's good to be aware if you're using fillers and how much. Here's another piece of feedback: repetitive language. So if you've used a word a lot often, then it'll point this out. In some cases, some people use words like you know, like da, 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 and it'll hopefully catch that and raise your awareness about that. In terms of pronunciation, clearly, even though I didn't speak very naturally, I still pronounced the words generally okay, but it did point out a couple words that it felt my pronunciation wasn't quite good. I mean, it is based on American English, so I'm Canadian, but it shouldn't be a big difference. But in any case, this is great if, you know, in terms of preparing for a presentation, there are certain words that it's saying you need to improve your presentation, then you can, right? You can listen.
Strategies.
And then you can practice. Let's see if it comes up here. Strategies. So it's listening, and then you got it right. So I did it well, okay? And then tried as well, yeah. So I had a couple words that it says I could do better on, but depending on you, some of your pronunciation might need improvement, okay? Now, moving down, this is a key piece of feedback, is the pitch, or this is kind of related to the varied voice, the intonation and things like that, okay? So you notice there's this rectangle that in blue, and that's the target area for your voice in terms of intonation and pitch. And notice, you know, you could tell from the way I gave the presentation, right? It was very flat, and intentionally, yeah? And the AI notices this, right? Almost basically all my presentation was in the monotone area. This is the kind of the flat area that you really want to avoid. this is what really bores audiences, okay? And you'll lose them if you keep talking that way. And I probably lost you for part of the presentation as well, right? So this is a key piece of feedback from Speaker Coach. And if you do have parts of your presentation or most of your presentation outside the target area, in the monotone area, this is something you really need to work at. And you can, go onto the internet and use YouTube or something and try to get advice on how to improve your pitch, your intonation. It's not something I can just give you a piece of advice and you can fix it, right? Pauses are an important thing, and word emphasis is also quite important, quite important. You see how I emphasized quite, right? So, but you really want to try to move this up to the target. And then finally, there's a last piece of feedback, and I'm a bit surprised that it shows only one slide. And this is basically, you want to avoid just simply reading from the slides, okay? And I thought I was doing it with more slides, to be honest with you. But it identified one slide in particular where it felt I was just reading the text, okay? In terms of your slide design, clearly, you shouldn't put a lot of information on the slide, just some main points, and then you can talk and describe it and provide more details, right? So that will help prevent you from reading from the slide by not having a lot of text. But in any case, it will catch it if it feels you're just reading the text on the slides. Okay, so that is the different types of feedback that you'll get. And basically, now that I know what I can do better, especially in terms of the pitch, right? And now I can go ahead and rehearse again. And, I might have to do some searches in terms of how to improve. I might have to do some practice, but then I can rehearse again and see if I can do better in terms of the kind of feedback that Speaker Coach gives me. Okay, so let me try to give a real presentation this time. Okay, so here we go. And I'll unclick this and start rehearsing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jay, and today I'm going to take you through my journey as a critical thinker, which is a little special because I'm the teacher of the course, right? And yet I still went through a journey in my critical thinking, and I'd like to give you an idea about my journey as a critical thinker in the course. So one of the critical thinking strategies that I feel was very useful for me came from chapter 3 of the course book, and it's called intellectual humility. The idea of being humble, not thinking too much of yourself, not thinking you're better or superior, is really related to being aware that you don't have all the information, you lack some knowledge, if not a lot of knowledge, and therefore everyone sort of needs to investigate and explore certain topics more, right? Where it's very rare that we are like the top experts. So we need to find out more. And this humility also involves listening to others and not thinking that we have all the information we need, right? Getting their perspectives, their ideas, thinking about it, evaluating it. It's quite important from the point of view of a critical thinker, being humble and willing to listen to others and exploring topics with each other. Another critical thinking strategy that I really benefited from in this course is related to assumptions, and key critical thinking question, right? Number 5, I think it is. What assumptions am I making? This question is useful because it does help me avoid simple mistakes, which I tend to make sometimes, right? Where I just assume I don't have a meeting today and I don't check, right? And therefore I miss a meeting, or something more important where I have a belief about something, related to an important decision, and I just assume that I know when in fact I don't, right? And I haven't checked. So keeping this question in mind and checking my assumptions can be quite useful. And I've found even now, obviously I'm not a young person, but I still have to catch myself making assumptions. Now, making assumptions, everyone does it, and every day we do it, but just be aware, I'm just more aware that I need to check my assumptions more often than I'm used to. And it's thanks to this course and the emphasis on that I've improved in that way. So in terms of self-evaluation of critical thinking, one of the, in chapter 5, before the course, I felt I did have, a good understanding of the basic critical thinking concepts, and I could use them and apply them fairly successfully. So that kind of put me at stage 4 as a practicing thinker. But by the end of the course, especially thanks to the course book and other readings I've done on critical thinking that have kind of expanded my perspective on critical thinking, I feel I've advanced to stage 6 as an accomplished thinker, with this sort of deeper understanding and wider perspective on critical thinking. So now I'd like to talk about an example of change thinking due to critical thinking in the course and the learning I've done. And this relates to my move from Macau to Hong Kong. I used to work in Hong Kong. I worked at the University of Macau. Sorry, I used to work in Macau. I worked at the university there. And but my wife, her career as an alternative practitioner of alternative medicine wasn't going so well in Macau. It's small and kind of traditional. And we just naturally assumed that Hong Kong would be better because it's international and modern, right? And so we went ahead and we made a move to Hong Kong. I got a job in Hong Kong. It's a good job, but our assumption was wrong, and her career did not take off in Hong Kong, and there was no improvement in this respect. And we did, undergo some financial pressures, mostly because in Macau we didn't pay for rent. So this, if I were to do something different, then I'd check that assumption and maybe do some more research, or maybe have my wife go to Hong Kong first to see if she can make connections, and that might have improved the situation, give us a better understanding of whether her career would do better. Okay, so yeah, check assumptions. So in conclusion, yes, I am a teacher of the course, but there's still value in critical thinking and building on what I already knew about critical thinking and the skills I already had, and the value of being exposed to different approaches, especially in the course book. But just keep in mind your students, but even a teacher can learn, and this journey as a critical thinker is kind of a never-ending curve, hopefully upwards, right? So I hope you enjoyed that, and thanks very much for listening. Okay, so there we go. So as you can see, in terms of the time, I hit the limit, right? In the lecture, I told you that you shouldn't go over 5.5 minutes. You should aim for 5 minutes. And in this case, I think because I was using the technology, it threw me off a little, but I went to 5.5 minutes. So that's fine. There's no penalty, right? And in terms of my pace, it's still quite good, right? Right, pretty much down the middle. No problem there. And my pace over time is well within the target. Okay. Notice here in the pace, it says, like 150 words per minute is actually quite reasonable, but anything over that is maybe a little fast. Notice that now I switched to a more natural type of speech. It did identify some fillers that I used, and it's useful to know. I'm not sure that it really interfered with my communication and it interfered with my audience's engagement, but it's interesting, that I do use a fair amount of fillers. So it's something to keep an eye on, okay? I didn't, again, use much repetitive language. This is, again, interesting that it picked up some pronunciation issues. I'm not sure why, but perhaps there were certain words that maybe I was speaking too quickly and it didn't pick up well. Yeah, but it's worth investigating and trying to pronounce the words maybe a little more clearly. Yeah. But in terms of pitch, notice the big difference here, okay? Is I'm outside the monotone zone, right? My voice is no longer flat. There's much more varied intonation and pitch and word emphasis and pauses and things like that. So this is fantastic, a fantastic result, okay? And you did notice the difference, right? When I was giving the example presentation, the first time, very boring. The second time, much more animated, much more interesting. My voice was communicating um, with more emotion and you know, with different techniques, right? So that's a huge improvement. And again, it's a key piece of feedback that you need to look at for yourself. And then finally, notice that I didn't get any feedback about reading from slides this time. And I purposely, right, talked around the slides, gave a lot of, you know, sort of supplementary information or details, or tried to use some synonyms and things like that to communicate instead of just reading from the slides. So on the whole, the feedback is much better. Okay, there's always room for improvement, even for me. I guess I should work on my pronunciation, right? And learn to speak like a proper American. But in any case, I'll close that then. And yeah, this is a great tool that you can use for assessment 3, but also for any other presentation that you're going to give, whether it's at university, whether it's in your career, right? If you have access to OneDrive, you can upload a presentation and then just go to present, drop down, and rehearse with coach. Okay. So yeah, let me go back to my other presentation. Yeah, so right, the week 12 one. Yeah, and so just quickly review, okay? These are the areas of analysis or feedback, okay? And as I mentioned, the pitch piece of feedback is probably the most important, but the other ones are useful as well, okay? And yeah, please give it a try. I hope that you know, and share with your friends, you know, at university, because it's a fantastic tool that can help you improve that area of engagement with your audience, the voice. Okay, right. So now that we've had a look at engaging the audience through voice, let's return to the visuals, and let's go back over the slides from my example presentation and see, you know, to what extent they're visually effective. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up again. And let's just have a look full screen. Okay, so the initial slide, you know, as you can see, the title is in quite large font, okay? And that's something that, you know, generally you want to make sure there's large font because, you know, people at the front might be able to see it clearly, but you want to make sure people at the back can see the text clearly and easily as well, okay? Now we have this slide, okay? And I used PowerPoint Designer just to do it, and it gave me this template, and it looks fine to me. And notice with, you know, one of the key things, again, is the size of the font. Yes, there's different sizes, but they're all pretty large, okay? And as a result, one of the ideas of using a large font is that you can't put so much text, okay? And you don't want a lot of text on your slides. You want the audience to listen to you. So large font, easy to read, right? In terms of, in this case, it's black and white. And then the use of the image, the use of the woman, and putting meaningful images that connect with the main idea of the slide is useful, okay? And in this case, this slide is about intellectual humility, the awareness of a lack of knowledge, kind of, I don't really know. And this woman, I found a picture that kind of, has that meaning, or she's gesturing as if I don't really know, okay? And so if you can, using images to support the message on the slide is quite useful. It's not the only way to use images, but it is a decent way to do it, okay? And effective to communicate your message in different ways. So for this one, it's about assumptions. And probably it's less effective in terms of the image, right? To be honest with you, I kind of changed this slide because originally I had this idea of definitions and meaning. And this is actually a picture of a dictionary, right? And it's supposed to connect with definitions. But then I changed my slide to assumptions, but I didn't change my picture. And so the picture is not as effective in supporting the message. It's generally okay because like checking your assumptions can be connected to like taking a magnifying glass to them and examining them. So that's not necessarily bad, right? But it is, sort of related to a dictionary, so that's not as good. But still, we still have a large font, not so much text, and the text is clearly visible from a color point of view. Okay. Now we have a slide about self-evaluation. Again, see the larger text. And then, I think probably it would have been better for me just to show before the course first, and then click and show the end of the course. Thinking back, that's an improvement I can make, right? In terms of how I reveal the information on the slide to the audience, not all at once, always, okay? In terms of the image, it's much simpler this time. And, it talks about before and end and going up from stage 4 to stage 6. So thematically, this idea of onwards and upwards, kind of climbing a mountain is, it's a simple kind of image, but it kind of fits, right? I could have taken out this onwards and upwards, but I felt if I just used this image by itself, then people might have been confused about what it is. Is it a pencil or something, or some kind of cartoon character? So I thought the onwards and upwards text would be useful to make the image clearer in people's minds. Notice the use of bold, okay, so to highlight like before the course and end of the course. So using, it's the same font, but just using a bold to set certain text, catch the eye of the audience, okay? So, and then we have the example of change thinking, and we have an image which is from Macau. Okay, so since I'm talking about Macau, I thought I'd include an image of Macau. I might have maybe had two images, right? One of Macau and one of Hong Kong, just to show kind of like contrast, right? Because in my talk, I contrasted kind of Macau being smaller and kind of more traditional, and Hong Kong being more modern and international. So I could have perhaps thought about using an image of Hong Kong to replace the Macau one after I started talking about Hong Kong. Yeah, so that might be an improvement as well to support the meaning. But again, notice the use of bold again, and not a lot of text. Okay, it's very clear, very kind of simple, right? Not a lot happening on the slide. You have to be careful about putting too much on slides, because visually people generally like a simple approach as long as it's decently attractive, okay? And then finally, my last slide, my conclusion, and I talk about, again, this kind of theme of even a teacher can learn. And this phrase, building on previous knowledge and skills, kind of connects with this image, right? Of adding to a puzzle, putting together a puzzle, building something. Perhaps it's not the clearest kind of image, but it does have this idea, like we talk about building a puzzle, right? And it connects with this idea of like building on your critical thinking. So I might be able to come up with a better image, but the red is quite striking. So I thought that it would work okay. Yeah. So on a whole, let's go back to the other. Let's return to the lecture. And so the question was, what sort of makes the slides visually effective, right? And I admit that they can be more effective. Okay, it could be improved, but let's just go back to the points, right? Clear and simple slides, not too much text. The main points are put on the text, but not really much in the way of detail, right? Using a large font, and using a large font forces you to put less text. And then finally, do the images have meaning? Do they support the meaning that you communicate on the slide in terms of the main point or points? So keep this in mind. And in terms of clear and simple, also keep in mind, if you use graphs for this assessment, you probably won't use any graphs or things like that, but or charts or diagrams, but also keep those simple, okay? Because an audience can only process so much information visually, and the simpler the better, right? Just to support your point, to get to your point. Right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about today in terms of assessment 3 and your presentation is the structure. And as you saw from the example presentation, there's basically an introduction, brief, and then talking about 2, maximum 3 creative strategies, right? 1 from the course book, at least. And then a self-evaluation, and then finally a personal example about how your thinking might have changed compared to something you did before or a decision you made before. And then finally a conclusion. So those are the basic parts, and you've got to fit these parts into about 5 minutes, okay? But one thing to keep in mind with this basic structure is that if you want to aim for an even higher mark, okay, then one thing you could consider is how to show connections between different parts. And of course, you can just go part by part without any connections, and you'll still fulfill the requirement. But higher level kind of writing and higher level kind of presentations, they try to connect parts, so you choose the parts kind of carefully, right? And in this case, you might have noticed that in part 3, in my personal example, I highlighted this idea of how we made an assumption about Hong Kong. And that connected to one of the critical thinking strategies, right, that I presented about making assumptions and checking your assumptions. So it's not absolutely necessary, but it's good, right? Because I made a connection between a strategy that had an impact on me and a personal example, okay? So that's kind of highlighted and reinforces this idea of the importance of that critical thinking strategy. You might have also noticed that I highlighted in my self-evaluation the importance of the course book and how it kind of widened my perspective. And this also kind of relates to what I mentioned in my critical thinking strategies, because one of the critical thinking strategies was from the course book. Okay. So there's a couple connections between different parts in the presentation, and these are nice. These are nice, as opposed to just random kind of things that don't have a connection, that don't fit so well together, right? It's something to kind of aim for if you can. A last kind of connection that you might consider is related to the introduction and conclusion. And this is something you can think about after you've kind of almost finished your presentation in terms of the ideas you think you're going to present, and trying to come up with this overall theme, okay? In my case, it was kind of easy because it's this theme of even a teacher can improve over the period of a course. Even a teacher of critical thinking can improve their critical thinking, right? So that's kind of a theme that I introduced briefly at the beginning. And then it came up in the self-evaluation as well. And then kind of I mention again, right, in the conclusion. And this overall theme is a nice way to connect all the things together. Now, it's not like a specific connection related to assumptions or related to humility or anything like that, but it does connect them all with this idea of even a teacher can learn, and those were the things that a teacher learned in the course. So that's another way that you can introduce these connections by thinking of, after you've put together your ideas for the presentation, your strategies and self-evaluation and an example, trying to think, well, what's the overall theme that's coming out of this? Obviously it's often related to learning or something like that, but what specifically do you want to say about critical thinking, learning, and your journey? Okay. So that's about it for the week 12 video lecture. And the purpose, as you saw, was to help you to perform better in the assessment 3, to give you some ideas about how to engage the audience. Okay, this is one of the criteria that we give you a mark in, is audience engagement. And so you want to do well, but keep in mind, if you engage your audience, then the other criteria will probably be better too. Okay, because in terms of the content, right, the analysis that you do, yeah, it's more effective if the audience is enjoying your presentation and paying attention. So hopefully you can improve with your visuals as well. Think about those principles of engaging visuals, and think about the structure of your presentation and how well you can make things fit at the same time that you're fulfilling the specifications, the requirements of the assessment 3. Okay, so do make sure you do that, but also see if you can aim for a higher mark by making these clear connections between some of the different parts. Okay, good luck with it. In the week 13 lecture, which is also now available, I'll be talking about how to do the Q&A part. After you give your presentation, there's a 4-minute Q&A, question and answer. And so, together we'll explore about, some tips, some advice about performing well in the Q&A, and also talk about the final draft of assessment 2, which is the critical response and the report on the use of online tools. So I'll go over some points for that as well. So be sure to watch the week 13 video lecture before you give your presentation, before the Q&A, and also before you submit your final draft for assessment 2. Okay, thanks.